Good evening and welcome to our Big River Training Team Run Walk panel. My name's Mike Flynn. I'm the store manager at Big River University City, and I'm the program director for Big River's community training programs. Tonight, we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about just run walk method in general, how it can be helpful as far as accomplishing your goals. We're going to cover some physiology and training philosophy a bit. We're also going to dispel some common misconceptions about run walk. There's definitely that erroneous stereotype out there that it's only for slow people or that it's only for people as a training tool to get up to a continuous run. I'm going to debunk that tonight and make the case that it's helpful for people in the middle of the pack and at some faster paces as well in a lot of contexts. And then we're going to let our pacers from our run walk and walk group share some of their personal experiences with run walk methodology. So to kick things off, I'm going to let our pacers go around and introduce themselves. Jen, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Jen Koitzer, and I am the pacer for the 1230 Run Walk group. I started running in 2013 with Big River. I did the half marathon training for my goal race, which was a 5K. I took a couple of sessions off and then did my first half marathon, also Mo Cowbell in 2015. And I've been pacing since 2017. So this is my 6th year pacing this general time group. I have a goal to run 50 half marathons before I turn 50. And I just completed number 42 2 weeks ago. So I'm getting close, and I've got that 50th half marathon planned for next winter in Hawaii because it's the 50th state. So I'm working hard towards that, and I plan to run my first marathon this fall. So that's a little bit about me.
Great, thank you. Diana?
Hi, I'm Diana Van Buren. I pace the 13 Run Walk group. I started running casually like in the mid 90s, and I just kind of did it for fun just because it was a volunteer effort with a company that I worked for, that it did a lot of charity work. And I didn't really start taking running seriously until about 2010. I was living in Florida at that time. And I worked with a run coach down there, never really understood run walk, methodology, but I knew myself, I always had a hard time completing a consistent run. And then moving back here to Missouri in 2016, I started running with the Big River group, and I actually started with Jen's group, which was a little fast for me. And we did this methodology with Run Walk. And I thought, well, this is a really great way to train my body to get in better shape, better health, have recovery time to be able to, run towards a goal that I was trying to complete, which was doing my first half marathon in 2017. So looking on, I started doing pacing, I think, with Big River, either the end of 2019 or 2020, I can't remember. But my goal is to try to work my way up to completing a full marathon maybe next year. So this year I have 2 halves coming up, one in Albany, Georgia, and then another one in April in Nashville. So I'm looking forward to that and maybe working into doing a full.
Great, thank you. Nancy?
Okay, I guess I'm kind of the reverse of these other ladies. I guess I'm working my way down in my running. I ran my first marathon, started training in 93. Did my first half in 93, did my first full in 93. Obviously many years ago, used to be a lot faster. Didn't do my second marathon until 2000, after having a third child in between. Over the years, I've actually completed over 100 marathons. And as I've gotten older, especially, I have found that the Run Walk has really helped me in staying healthy and avoiding burnout. I've always enjoyed running, especially with groups. But after a while, you kind of start dreading it. I think the Run Walk just gives you a little bit of variance within your runs. So I've enjoyed that. This is actually my first season as lead coach for the 1330 pace group, and thoroughly enjoying it and meeting everybody. Not too concerned personally about my pace, but I enjoy watching others meet their achievements. Guess that's it.
Great, thanks. And then Michelle?
Apologize for being on two screens. I'm afraid I'm going to lose you on my main screen because my internet's acting horribly today. So I have my phone as a backup, but with no video on that though, so you can just kind of pretend. So my name is Michelle Pardo, and I can't remember truly when I started running. It was just kind of something everybody seemed to be getting into. All my friends, and 5Ks were fun, and color runs were coming up, and things were this looked like fun, or this medal looked great, and I would just get in there and do a 5K and then be miserable for a week because I thought I could eat 10 donuts that day and then be miserable for a week because I never trained and I never did it right. So I got to the point where I started doing like regular training for a 5K, and about 2015. I guess I'd say. And then it was a couch to 5K group, and made my way through that process of walking till I could actually run a full 5K. And I was so proud of that achievement, but I thought, well, I'll never do anything greater than that. And I had a coach who was a wonderful gentleman who said, I'm going to start a half marathon group. And basically, if you can run 3 miles 3 times a week, I can get you to run a half marathon by the end of the training. And I believed in him, and he believed in me, and we had a whole group, and we did that. And so my first half was go in 2016. And I have done, I don't count. I know I've done more than 20. I'm kind of like, not as much as Nancy. I've never done a full. I never intend to do a full. I'm on my way the other way down. This is my second season pacing walkers. I've done it before, but I've also done the 1330 group. I've always been a walk runner. That year I trained to do the half marathon and run the whole thing. I finished, but I was slow, and I wanted to figure out how I could get faster. And so the run walk is what brought me to pick up my speed. I was able to get to a point where I could finish a half marathon. I wasn't concerned about running the whole thing. It was actually much faster with the walk run. And I think that that's what suited me.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's a good point that Michelle made there, is that oftentimes the run walk is surprisingly fast. So again, my name's Mike. I paced the 945 group for training team, but I actually last year and in prior years have used run walk quite a bit myself. So in the longer contexts, for example, last fall, I ran a 100K race, so 62 miles, and I used a run walk race plan from the start in that. And as you saw in one of the teaser emails about this in the training team newsletter, I think that my strategic use of run walk is the reason that I won that race, because I know what the people who came in second and third did, because we talked throughout the race, and I feel like I just had a more solid race plan than they did. And then earlier in the year, I ran marathons on consecutive days in Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming, and used run walk in order to get through that very successfully as well. I've also paced a few marathons with run walk groups and such. So, and I've got that coming up actually in a week and a half. I'm going to be pacing the 5 hour and 30-minute group at a marathon in Ave Maria, Florida. So that's a little bit of our background as far as who's on the call this evening. For the next section here, I'm going to lay some physiological background and kind of explain the benefits of run walk and explain why it works. So again, you kind of saw in one of the emails we sent out the effectiveness. So the average person who uses run walk improves their half marathon time by 13 minutes, by 7 minutes. The average marathon improvement is 13 minutes by using an appropriate run walk interval as opposed to continuous running. I'll show you why that can be momentarily. And then the other benefits, in addition to time, because we heard a lot of runners don't necessarily care about their finish time, they want to enjoy the experience, is that you can kind of stay healthier doing this, that you are minimizing the stress on the weak links in your muscular chain. So you're less likely to strain things, to overwork your muscles, to get injured, and you can maintain performance for a much longer period of time. And also on days when it's hot outside, you're going to have much more success using run walk than continuous running, because when you are continuously running, your body heat just keeps going up and up and up. And whenever the temperature is above 60 degrees outside, you're kind of fighting with that. There's a few different numbers that are floating around out there, but basically once we get above 60 degrees or 70 degrees, for every 5 degrees in temperature, for most people, it's about a 30-second decline in pace per mile at the same effort level, because the body just keeps heating up and you're stressing yourself. But when we're interjecting those walk breaks and letting the body recover, that helps us exercise and perform for a much longer period of time. So I've thrown some images up on the screen here. If some of you have Garmin watches, the watch face might look familiar to you. You definitely don't need a Garmin watch to implement anything that we're going to talk about tonight. I'm just using this as a foundational background. And so Garmin and some other groups use a 5-zone training model for exertion levels. There are also some 3-zone models out there which clump these same 5 zones down into 3. But we're going to use this 5-zone model for our explanation here. And I'm going to start at the top, up in zone 5. So between zone 4 and zone 5, right between that orange and the red, is a barrier basically, which is your lactate threshold. And so as we exercise, we accumulate lactate, sometimes called lactic acid, in our muscles. And our body is normally clearing that out and keeping us going. But once we get to this lactate threshold, we're accumulating lactate at a faster rate than we can clear it. And this leads to muscle fatigue, cramping, significant decline in performance. So there's a whole lot of room in that red zone up at the top. That's everything from sprinting to just slightly overdoing it. But once we go above that lactate threshold, we have about 10 minutes of continuous exercise before we can't do anything anymore and have to significantly calm down. So when we're talking about half marathons, longer distance events, we don't want to go there. We want to stay out of that. But as I mentioned earlier, when we're continuously exercising, continuously running, we're getting that heart rate to keep climbing up and up and up. So we need to interject those walk breaks to get it to recover and come back down. Going down a little bit to the orange zone, which Garmin calls the threshold zone. This is about 80 to 90% of your max heart rate or exertion level. This is fairly challenging. This is actually somewhere though we do want to spend some time while we're training, but we don't want to spend long chunks of time here, and we don't want to be doing our half marathon or a marathon or a long run here. Most people can sustain an effort for about an hour in this zone. And then after that, their performance really falls apart. The green, the aerobic zone, this you can sustain almost indefinitely. So this is where we want to be racing our marathon. This is where we want to be doing our half marathon. This is where long distance triathletes are exercising. You, as long as you're taking care of your hydration and nutrition needs and keeping your body kind of functioning, you can maintain this exertion level pretty much all day. Below that, this blue zone, the easy zone, this is easy conversational pace. This is, for some people, this is a really brisk walk. For others, it's a light jog. But this is casual, comfortable exercise. And we actually want to do a lot of training here. This is where we develop our base aerobic fitness. So if you ever hear someone talk about building their base or aerobic development, a lot of times they're talking about spending a lot of time doing this easy zone 2 volume. And then below that, that's warming up. There's really no training benefit there. That's just kind of easing into your workout and then cooling down afterwards, which we do want to do for injury prevention, just to kind of warm the muscles up. And then the cool down at the end it helps clear byproducts out of the muscles. So I mentioned green, that aerobic zone, that's a great place to do endurance racing. It's not actually shown to be a great place to train. There's not really developments and improvements that your body makes if you're training there. It's just kind of blah, like you're doing it, you're sustaining it, but it's not helping you get any more fit. Training in zone 2 helps build endurance. In training in zone 4, the orange zone helps build strength and helps build speed. And so throughout the week, we kind of want to spread out our workouts and spend some time in the easy zone 2 and spend some time in that threshold zone 4. In general, when we're doing our long runs, we want that to be kind of comfortably challenging. We don't want to be huffing and puffing on our long run. We don't want to be like hanging on to the point that we can barely finish it. We want to finish and be like, yeah, I could do another mile. I could do another however many minutes. We don't want to be draining the tank in training. We want to save that for race day. So kind of an overview there. Now you get to peek into the life of Mike a bit. So these are real life examples of a marathon that went well for me on the left, the one that says 9:28 at the top, and a marathon that did not go so smoothly on the right that says 9:51 at the top. And these are both from last spring. The one on the left, if we look at the distribution down at the bottom, you'll see that the largest chunk of time is in zone 3. There is a substantial amount of time in zone 4, but there's 7 seconds in zone 5. The blue pace graph is reasonably consistent. There's some valleys there from stopping at water stops. There's a couple downhills on that course. And again, the heart rate graph is reasonably consistent. Look at the image on the right, and you see that the race started off fast, and then it kind of crashed and burned. And when we look down at the bottom, you'll see why. We have nearly an hour in heart rate zone 5. We've got a substantial amount of time in zone 4, and I was just overdoing it. I was up at and above that lactate threshold, and the body just stops moving at one point. And then I devolved into run walk, but it wasn't the strategic, intelligent implementation of run walk. It was survival mode, run walk, let's get to the finish line. And so you'll see faster paces were run at points in time on the right, but over time that average pace is lower, and that average heart rate's higher for the whole workout, even though there's all that walking at the end. So this is kind of a good use, bad use scenario. And then briefly here, these are some of those races I was talking about earlier, because those last 2 examples I showed you, those were continuous runs or attempted continuous runs, but I was using that to kind of explain the heart rate zone physiology. Here, these were all run walk from the beginning. And so these first 2 on the left, these are back-to-back marathons, and you'll see very consistent effort across the 2 days. And then on the right, we've got the 100K I did last fall. And my interval varied, and we'll talk, I'm sure people always, when we talk about run walk, want to know what's the perfect interval and so on. And in both of these instances for me, it varied throughout the workout. The courses on the left out west on those consecutive marathons, they were in the mountains, they were at altitude, there were some hills. And I was actually doing run walk based on feel. As a more experienced runner, I am fairly in tune just with exertion and effort levels in my body. But I had heart rate alerts set on my watch. And when I creeped up above a certain heart rate, my watch said, nope, it's time to slow down. And I'd interject a short walk break. And sometimes that was identifying landmarks on the side of the course. I'm going to walk to this tree, then I'm going to run to that tree, then I'm going to do this. And I kind of knew when my run and my walk were each going to start, just for accountability before I got to that transition point. The 100K, the graph on the right, that one I went out and I said, I'm going to start running a mile, walking 30 seconds. And I'm going to do that until my heart rate starts creeping above a certain threshold, which was the top of zone 3, the bottom of zone 4. And then I'm going to start shortening the interval throughout the day. So I went from basically run a mile, walk 30 seconds, to run 5 minutes, walk 30 seconds, to run 3 minutes, walk 30 seconds, to 2 minutes, to 90 seconds, all the way down to run 60, walk 30. And that was successful for me throughout the day. But again, they were more heart rate based, exertion based intervals based on the course and the duration of the event than just going in saying, I'm going to rigidly follow this specific predetermined interval throughout the day. So I hope that kind of helps explain things just as far as that fatigue avoidance, but that's really important because if we go out and we just overcook it and we're spending time up above that lactate threshold, then we're going to crash and burn on the second half of the race. And that's not fun and that's not enjoyable. And that's not what we want to be doing. This point, I'm going to turn things back over to our pacers and let them share some examples that they have, maybe some success stories, some advice from how they found and settled into the interval they're using or the run walk strategy that they're implementing.
guess I can go first. So right now, with training team, I use a 2-minute interval. And so to get to our 12:30 average, my group tends to run around a 10-minute pace. And then we're walking, at this point in the season, about a 16-minute pace. One of the things that's been successful for me in the past is really shortening that run interval. I've done lots of different intervals, and I've found that I'm actually much faster the shorter that I run. I used to run 5 and 2 when I started all of this, and I've been able to cut like 26 minutes off my pace for the half marathon just by coming down in that. One of the things that's also helped me has been that I work very actively at training my walk as much as I train my run. And so there are days that I go out and I just push my walk pace, and I'm, doing all the hills and everything, but just strictly walking, because the run walk methodology, you're not walking because you're tired or because you're exhausted. It's part of what you're doing. And it's important to walk with a purpose and to train that walk pace as well. And then, like everyone else, I'm sure will reflect, a lot of times in races, I will mix up that interval. I will run the terrain like Mike was talking about. And, if I have a really long hill, I like the track club half, the finish used to be like 1.5 miles uphill, instead of just getting really frustrated with that or burning out on the 2 and 2 up that, you can change your intervals up there and really make it smooth to get to the top. So that's something that I really like to mix up during the week and run lots of different paces and intervals during the week as well.
Thanks, Jen. Do any of our other pacers have some advice or tips, success stories they'd like to share?
I can go with some of that. I think the run walk pace is an important training tool for a lot of maybe new runners that feel like they can't do it, or they don't know how to do it, or they see like Mike's group, the fast people running, and they think I would love to get there, but I know I can't. A lot of it too plays in the mind. So if you can set yourself out a goal, like Mike was saying, hey, if I can run to that tree, or if I can run to the next tree. I do that with myself when I'm not doing a run walk. If I'm in a race, I won't always start out with a 2-2. I'll just go slow enough where I know my body needs a break, and then I'll do a 2-2, and then I'll pick it up again and maybe do another 5-2 or whatever it may be. I think, with folks that, want to be able to run faster, a run walk methodology is a great way to train your mind to know that you can get to that next step or that next level of what you really want out of your training. So coming here to Missouri, again, didn't really realize that this was a thing, but learning from others and understanding my own body and my own goals, it is definitely helpful to reach. And again, I have too also seen faster time for my runs than previous, not even knowing about a run walk methodology. Before, I was just running until I couldn't run no more, then stopping and then trying to do it again, and then definitely tanking in the end. So if you're, setting yourself in a pace where, hey, like Jen says, she does a 16 walk to a 10 run. I'm kind of the same. I do like a 10:30, 10:45 to a 16 and a half, 6:45 walk to be able to keep that 13 pace. You know, if I want to set my goal faster, then I know I either need to up my walk pace or, you know, up my run pace. So either or change the times. It can be a 3-1, a 2-1, or, you know, some paces like to do a 30-30. I don't particularly like that pace, but it has been very successful for a lot of runners.
And so Diana made a point at the beginning of her comments there where she talked about using run walk intervals to get faster. And that's what elite runners do. So the fast people, the racing team guys up at the front, training team every week, it's not necessarily run walk, but they're doing hard run, easy jog a lot in their training throughout the week. They're doing workouts like this. Again, these are my paces, theirs are much faster, but they're doing workouts like running kilometer repeats. And here you really see the effectiveness of this walk break when you look at the grid and that heart rate graph on the bottom left there. My warm up, that heart rate just keeps going up and up and up. I run that first kilometer and then, you know, get recovery. And that's 90 seconds right there. And that's a significant drop in heart rate. And then you see I'm able to repeat that over and over again. And this is what they're doing. This is how they're training to get faster. This is how the pros are training to get faster. And so run walk is just a different form of interval training. But this is a strategy that a lot of people could use. And if they ran their half marathon or their marathon from the beginning using run walk, they may well finish it faster than if they start out with just a deliberate, I'm going to run and get into survival mode at the end. Nancy, Michelle?
I was just going to say that one thing that I think's been helping me, again, I'm pacing the walkers this season, so I'm not doing a ton of running, but I do have what I'm going to call my final half, my swan song coming up in New York in May. And so I'm thinking about my training for that. And while I do want to do a run walk for that, what I've been doing on the treadmill while I'm doing my training during the week is upping my walk to get close to my run. And I know that that's not, I don't know if that's controversial at all, but I'm finding that my walk is getting extremely fast. And I've been really enjoying that and can keep a really good pace with that method. Now, it's harder when you're out on the road because you tend to get lazy. You want to walk with a purpose, but you tend to get lazy. But I think with it's mental at that point that if I can do that during the week, I can exude that on the weekends then as well for the longer runs. But like I said, I play around with it, but I try to keep pretty close, which means taking my run down a little bit, but because I've been pulling the walk up. They're not in sync, but they're getting closer. And so I found that to be the treadmill to be a good help in that scenario.
Nancy, is there anything you wanted to share?
I had to step out for a minute. I've been coughing for the last 3 or 4 weeks and I didn't need a coughing fit on screen. So I kind of missed a lot of the comments, but I totally agree. When people think walk, they think the leisure stroll. And all of us know that's not the case. It's the walk with a purpose. So that's the biggest thing to push, I think, on the run walk section is you can, the ladies have said, you can be just as fast, but when you're walking, you know, you got to have some meaning behind it, whether it be for 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 30-30 or whatever people do. And it doesn't slow people down. I mean, I know, especially so many people have that walk stigma. They don't want to walk, but they don't understand that, it can be just as fast overall effort.
Hey, it's an Olympic sport. Speed walking.
It is. And they're fast too.
You're crazy fast.
They work hard though with the arms. The true speed walkers.
Walk like you're late for your flight to Hawaii tomorrow. Mary Beth says.
Yeah. So we all want to be tomorrow.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Mike, go ahead.
was gonna
My
say-
whole thing coming here from Florida to Missouri is Florida is a very flat
I was just saying, did
courses.
you
I
expect
mean,
these hills in Missouri?
well, I mean, I actually grew up here, but I didn't like running when I was younger. But coming from Florida and running a lot of flat courses and just everything flat, unless you were going over a bridge, to me, having a run walk option is really ideal for someone who's trying to train to be able to run consistently up a hill, because it's a challenge if you've never really done it. But once you get used to it, like when I'm running at lunch when it's nicer out, I live in a very hilly area. Yeah, I'll kind of run down a hill, but I'll know I want to run up that hill. If I don't ever get that chance to run up it, then I'm never going to be able to train for it. So having that 2-2 or 3-1 is a great option to be able to train your body to run up a hill.
And hills are actually how I first kind of became a run walk convert, is when I got into trail running, and it's cool to walk the hills in trail runs. I was never a front of the pack runner, but I was always a solid middle of the pack, or kind of like 75th, 80th percentile runner. And so definitely subscribe to that. Like, walking is an act of weakness or a sign of failure. But then when I got into trail running, all this tactical, fast trail runners are walking the uphills because they know that they're just going to burn themselves out, and then they're going to get to the top of the hill and they're going to be drained, and their recovery is going to take so long. But if they power walk it, power hike it, and then they run the downhill with a purpose, it's much faster over the long run. We heard a couple of our pacers say that they realized that run walk was actually faster than the continuous run. I pace a lot of half marathons. I pace, normally it's somewhere between 210, 245. But when I've paced 230, I've always done that as a continuous run. And by the end, I feel just as drained running a 230 half is when I go out and I run like a 2-hour half, a 210 half. When I paced 5 hours using 90-30 intervals in Peoria last fall, like, we had the half and it was nothing. It's like, oh, this is easy. This is great. And, you sustain that because those walk breaks are really calming you down. They're keeping just your exertion level in check and letting you sustain your performance. Similarly, running half marathons, I've done it where I've taken, when you stop at the water stops, this is something else that people think about in races. And these are the pointers for, the middle of the pack and the faster pack runners is, and I've listened to coaching panels with experts on before, and a lot of the advice is, yeah, it's fine to walk the water stop, because frequently you're going to end up splitting the next mile faster if you take 20, 30 seconds walking through the water stop than if you barely get any water down, you garble your drink, that breaks tactical. It's good for you. So walk with a purpose, use it strategically, and walk briskly. Like, this is not the sluggish, slow walk. This is a purposeful walk. Jen mentioned she found that shorter run intervals were helpful for her after some experimentation. And that's what a lot of the coaching literature finds, is that actually shortening the run interval and then even shortening allows you to shorten the walk interval. So you're spending less time walking, but you're also more briskly walking. That the longer you stretch your walk out for, your walk slows down over time. So you're getting a lot of recovery in the first 15 seconds. You're getting a lot of recovery in the second 15 seconds. The science shows that after 30 seconds, a lot of recoveries actually happen. Kind of, if you think of it as an exponential curve, after that, the return on the investment's lower. And so if you can keep your walk breaks under a minute, that's especially on race day where you're concerned about your time, that's going to be really helpful to you. In training, we talked about, we want to do a lot of that zone 2 work. So on your long run, yeah, take longer walk breaks, keep the effort lower. That's great. In the middle of the week, maybe go out and just purposely walk for a few days. Like, your recovery day doesn't need to be a run walk day. It could be, you know what, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to go for a brisk walk, or I'm going to practice training my walk. As Michelle was saying, those are all helpful things that we can do as well, to kind of, develop and try and train for race day. So we do have some questions that were submitted during registration. One from Gabrielle: is there a good pace calculator for run walk so that I know what I need to run during my run phase for a certain goal time? And yes, I found one. I'm actually going to show you 3 pace calculators. I'm going to show you something else first, just for educational purpose. But this is the Jack Daniels VDOT calculator. There's another one very similar to this from Macmillan, and then there's some others out there as well. And these are great because you can get a lot of data from them. So in this case, I put in the half marathon distance. I put in the target time of 2:30, but this can be whatever you want it to be. And then it tells you that your average pace needs to come out at 11:26 a mile. And then below that, for the race pace, it gives you a mile split, a 1K, 800, 400 meter split. And so these can be helpful in terms of if you're going to go out and train race pace in the middle of the week. Well, here, let's go and let's do some 400s and then recover and such. So you can see those breakdowns. But what's also really helpful is if we click on that training tab, you'll get what's on the right over here, and it shows you these different paces. So it says you may be trying to race your half marathon at 11:25, 11:26 a mile, but you should be doing your easy days somewhere between 11:48 and 12:55. And that's a big range. But this is keeping that effort level down in that zone 2, that blue easy zone. It gives you a projected marathon pace, which is obviously slower than the half marathon pace. And then it gives you a threshold target. So this is that orange zone 4 we were talking about earlier. So you can go out and this is what you'd be trying to hit over the course of a mile, or again, it shows you the shorter distances to the right in the middle of the week if you want to work on developing some of that strength and some of that speed. It then gives you an interval and the repetition as well down below that image. Those aren't as relevant for us when we're training for the, or sorry, the 8:35, that's for short, fast stuff. That's generally when we're training for half marathons and longer. Most training plans aren't calling for any meaningful amount of time at those paces. But that interval pace, that's something that can be really helpful. So kind of the differences there. Threshold would be more like, I'm going to do a continuous 10 to 20 minute effort at that pace. So that could be a continuous run, that could be a continuous run walk with a predetermined interval. The interval here, that's more, I'm going to do 800s or kilometers, and then I'm going to take a break. And these would be longer breaks. This would be going to be, I'm going to work hard, but then I'm going to take a 3-minute walk or some standing recovery. And then I'm going to do that again over and over again. But this helps strengthen the legs. You can improve your paces a little bit here. So that's one calculator that's helpful. The next one, this is the question Gabrielle was answering. And again, this is just something that I found. There's probably others out there, but this does the job. So you put in what your walk pace is. We heard from some of our pacers, 16 minutes. But then we also know that Michelle's walking really briskly. So whatever it is, what's your interval? So here I put in run for 3 minutes, walk for 30 seconds. What's your target pace? So 9 minutes, 6 seconds per mile. So this would be someone trying to come in right under 2 hours for a half marathon, and tells them you need to run at 8:32 a mile. So you're going to run for 3 minutes at 8:32 a mile. You're going to walk for 30 seconds at 15 minutes a mile. You can change these numbers around, and you can even experiment with this. So if you're going through training, maybe you're training for Go this spring. We're almost halfway through our training cycle. Maybe you've tried a few different things on your weekend long runs or throughout the week. You can start plugging in numbers here and seeing what's actually going to work the best for me and give me the fastest overall time on race day. Then the other calculator that I'm sharing here, and the URLs for these are at the bottom of the slides. But this, you're putting in your interval. So here, 3-minute run, 1-minute walk, again, whatever interval you want to use. Put in your run pace, put in your walk pace, and then it gives us what our elapsed time for different distances is going to be. And I know, for example, when I did this, if someone had asked me run 3 minutes at 10 minutes per mile and then walk for a minute, I would have never guessed that you'd hit the mile mark at 10:46. That seems way faster than I would have imagined. And yes, 14 minutes is a reasonably brisk walk, but it's not like bonkers crazy power walk. So this is something else that you could use to sample. I'm going to plug in some different intervals. I'm going to plug in my paces. And I'm going to see where I'm at. This does require figuring out what your walk pace is. So that's something that you need a known distance and a known time. There is, if you are using a Garmin, there is one way that's pretty easy to do that, and that's to use structured workouts on the watch. There's two ways to build an interval timer in for run walk. Jen knows this. We went through this one day at the U City store last fall. I did tech support after training team one day for someone in her group, but you can set the standard timer. Here's my run interval, here's my walk interval, and that just beeps at you and it tells you to change, but it's not recording paces. If you actually go in and you build a workout, which is tedious, which takes some time, but it will then give you your run split and your walk split. And then you can extrapolate that over time and you can see, okay, here's my average run. When you do that, you can click on these buttons at the top and you can isolate just your run interval or just your rest interval and see what those paces were. But actually, this is, I think, a good time for me to ask. So most of our pacers knew what their walk pace is. How did you go about figuring that out?
I guess I was just trying to get to that target for training team. Like I said before, I train my walk quite a bit too. And when I did my half marathon PR, for example, I was walking at about a 13-minute pace. And so that was something that I worked pretty hard at to get that down. But right now, we walk a little bit slower at the start of the season, and then we'll pick up that walk pace as we get a little bit more into mileage. And that's one of the things that's really nice. One of the things I like about the run walk too, is if you're having a really hard day, if it's really hot, you just can't hang at that faster run pace, then you can pick up your walk a little bit to really balance that out. And so that's just something that we played around with and trying to get to that target time that we're looking for our weekly long runs.
For me, I just by chance found a free calculator online. It was similar to the one, Mike, that you just showed the last time. It didn't have the list of all the races that you run, but you plug in the type of race that you want to run, and then you just plug in your minutes, either the 2:2 or a 3:1, and then it's gonna, tell you, then you plug in the time that you want to finish, and it's going to tell you what your walk pace should be and what your run pace should be, and you can adjust it from there just to set yourself a goal.
Just peeking at the chat here. Okay, so this is a good question. Kathy has a question here. How can you determine what your heart rate zone should be so you can customize your watch zones versus using the out-of-the-box default? Yeah, for a lot of people, the out-of-the-box default is right, but for a really significant portion of the population, the out-of-the-box default is nowhere close to correct. So for example, if we go and we look back at some of these heart rate graphs here, I'm 38 years old. The 220 minus your age says that my max heart rate should be 182. My lactate threshold varies depending on when I gauge it throughout the year, between 179 and 183. It goes a little higher in the summer. Heart rate tends to go up when it's hot outside, goes down when it's cold outside. So my lactate threshold is more where these watches think that my max heart rate should be. And that's not true for the majority of people, but it's a significant enough that you want to kind of test these things. So in the Garmin ecosystem, if you have a chest strap, you can actually do a guided workout on your watch, which will give you your lactate threshold. And that's the most accurate way to build the training zones on your watch, is off of that. Garmin lets you do it off of max heart rate, this other metric called heart rate reserve, which is better than max heart rate. Max heart rate's just, this is your max, and these are the percentages. Heart rate reserve says, here's your max, here's your resting, and then we're going to chunk that range between your max heart rate and your resting heart rate and determine the zones there. And for most people, those produce much more accurate zones, especially for the warm-up zone, the easy zone, the aerobic zone, than just using the pure max would. And then that lactate threshold often lines up pretty similarly to that heart rate reserve zone. But in order to, the other way to do it without kind of technology sensors on your body would be to go into a really, really hard effort and then manually calculate what your heart rate is as soon as you stop, like basically do a max effort and then stop, put your, take your pulse, figure out, okay, what did I get my heart rate up to? And then build your zones off of that. And that could get you kind of reasonably close. Yeah, VO2 max testing, same thing. So, but yeah, using the fitness trackers are great. They're consistent, but inconsistency is good. But if you get to the point that you're starting to build your training around these numbers that are coming off of a fitness tracker, you want to make sure that that number is accurate. So you do want to find some way to validate that. Another question that we got, this is from Allison, is when I want to speed up, is it more efficient to walk faster or to push the run pace? And like a good running coach, I'm going to say here that based on what you just asked me, the answer depends. So Allison, I think you're on the call and we can get more specifics and delve into that question more. But the big thing I'd say here is if you're already running fast enough that you're kind of to the point that you're fatiguing yourself, you're near that lactate threshold, we don't want to run any faster because then we're just going to burn ourselves out more. So if that's the case, we probably want to tinker with our interval, maybe shorten things up a bit, maybe tweak the walk interval a bit, or maybe elongate the run interval a bit too. So again, everyone's going to vary here, and I'm deliberately answering this question vaguely before we get clarification. But maybe you're doing 2-minute run, 1-minute walk, and you want to go a little bit faster. Well, see what happens if you run for 2 minutes and 15 seconds and walk for a minute. Try that one day. Do you feel significantly more fatigued at the end of your workout, or does that feel good? If everything still feels good, okay, now we're doing more running. Or similarly, what happens if we're doing 1-to-1? Well, what happens if we try run for a minute, walk for 50 seconds? Or run for a minute, walk for 45 seconds. You might still be getting enough recovery that you can go from there. These big whole numbers are nice. Whole minutes are nice. They're easy to think about, but you might find, hey, I can actually run for 1 minute and 15 seconds and walk for 45 seconds. And I can do that sustainably for 10 miles, a half marathon. Let's race at that. So Allison, let's delve into this. Where are you at now?
Well, I was trained by Galloway, so that's a different run walk method than yours. And he preaches not to go longer than 30 seconds because he doesn't believe you recover more than 30 seconds with walking. So how much I use run depends on how much of the 30 seconds walking I need. I tend to start out 20-20, 20 seconds running, 20 seconds walking. And if I'm feeling really strong, I'll up my running interval to, let's say, 24, 26. And if I'm really tired, I'll reverse it. I'll run 20 and walk 26. I don't seem to need much more than that. But I tend to work within a 30-second framework. What I noticed though is sort of following on what Michelle said. My natural walk is somewhere, if I'm just walking around, not paying any attention to anything, is around 18 minutes a mile, just walking. So I practice walking I need to practice walking briskly to make sure that when I'm walking with a purpose, I'm walking not over 16 minutes a mile, but closer to 16 minutes a mile, so that I think that that's my weakest part. I think I can run pretty fast. But if I'm not paying attention, if I get distracted, my walk will slow up more than my run will slow up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And so the Galloway intervals, I've got them up on the screen here. This is just scanned straight out of the most recent version of his book, The Run, Walk, Run Method. He is kind of the leading expert in the industry. These are based on, responses from thousands of participants who have gone through his programs that he's researched, and they are very short intervals for most paces. And he takes fatigue avoidance really, really seriously. Like, we're going to pick it up, we're going to slow it down, we're going to pick it up, we're going to slow it down. And these you can do for incredibly long periods of time. The first time, like when I paced 5 hours for the Whiskey Daddle Marathon last fall, and we were doing 90-30, I was amazed just at how easy that felt. Because I've done 5-hour marathons before where, I've run the majority of it or done the walk of shame approach at the end because it was a hot day and I burned out. And I was actually concerned going into the marathon because it was going to be in the 80s, and I'm a bigger guy and I don't do particularly well in the heat. But that was a very sustainable, very easy effort and such. So there's a lot of credibility to these. The biggest thing we tend to hear is that people often run because they want to enjoy running and they want to feel that sense of accomplishment. And if your watch is beeping at you every 30 seconds or whatever, that's kind of a mood killer or something for a lot of people. So there are other factors to kind of consider here too. I'm kind of agnostic on, this. I'm not taking a stand on Galloway or anything else. And as far as our pacers are concerned, they're all volunteers and we appreciate everything that they're doing for the program. And, everyone's settled on paces that make sense for them and such. But that 30-second walk break, yeah, normally, for example, when I was doing my 100K, after 30 seconds, I was like, okay, like for most of the race, I was like, I feel ready to run again. And yeah, I was only running for 60
Now, that's
seconds.
not to say if you're going up a hill, you may want an extra one or two.
Yeah. No, and yes, and so when we paced Whiskey Daddle last fall, it was 2 loops of the same course. The second loop, there was a hill. We'd gone up the hill the first time. I said, you know what, we're just walking this. And our whole group walked the hill and everybody was on board with it because they understood why we were walking the hill. Late in my 100K, I actually changed my deal. I made a deal with myself. Every time I split a mile, I got to do a minute and a half. So I got my normal 30-second walk, and then I got like an extra minute walk before I resumed. Just that was my, because things were fatiguing a little bit more. But there is something to be said for these shorter intervals as far as just keeping the effort lower and more sustainable. But the big guiding principle across things is walking with a purpose, keeping that walk fast and efficient. Yeah, I just started rambling a little bit. Allison, did that answer your question? Or
Yeah, I really appreciated hearing Jen talk because I think she was preaching sort of at me that, yeah, you do have to keep training your walk. You don't just train your run segments, you train your walk segments too. Andy?
Yep. Well, we used to have, I'm a little disappointed in that we used to have 2 30-30 groups that followed behind Jen's group. And now the only groups we have are 2-2. And I'm not going to run 2 minutes. I'm not going to, walk 2 minutes. So, I mean, it sort of leaves some of us out of it by not having a short interval run walk group.
But we worked it out last week. When some of us were doing 30-30, some of us went and just did 30-30, and we all ended up approximately the
Same
same
pace.
time.
That's what I was gonna answer. You guys, what's been going on? I apologize. I had COVID and was out for 2 weeks. So I know that 2-2 is just not feasible for the people that were doing 30-30s. Are they kind of making their own
Yeah,
group?
yeah. Of course, we're out of town at this point.
Yeah, Bob joined us last week. He said he'd been trying 2-2 and he was happy to see we were going, and he changed back to 30-30.
Well, and I know I've had that in the past and other people that want to run my pace, but don't want to run the 2 and 2. And so we follow each other and kind of bob in and out of each other while we're going.
Yeah.
And I know it's a different beast when you've got your pacer right there saying, here's our 30, we're going to run. And oh, here we go again, we're walking. And I'm just glad that you guys are able to come, even though, you know, we don't have that pacer that's saying that for you right now.
Well, we're out of town this week, but we'll be
Okay.
back.
Well, you're not missing any weather, that's for sure.
Well, we're still in Missouri.
Oh, no.
I'm not sure we could make it back.
But that's a
Oh.
point that's going to come up in our races too. So for example, Go St. Louis has pacers and they're carrying the sign and they're supposed to split every mile at a certain point. And having served as a pacer myself, a lot of times, like at the beginning or throughout, we end up telling people like, use this as a floating target. Like sometimes you're going to be ahead of us, sometimes you're going to be behind us, or sometimes you're going to be just behind us, sometimes you're going to be significantly behind us, but it's still helpful. And so, and I've had that like last fall pacing the 945 group of training team. There were a couple people doing run walk actually in my group. And so they'd run for a bit and then they'd go ahead and then they'd take their walk break and fall back. They were doing more of a run 0.8 of a mile, walk for a minute or whatever. I think it was a very fluid interval. And you know, they were working on running in all 50 states and same thing, kind of an enjoyable journey. And that was working for them. And, you know, they still kind of got to participate in the group a bit, but yeah, it is hard when we get to, you know, there's so much variety in training paces and such. Finding something that's compatible for everybody is going to be a little bit challenging sometimes.
Right, and you know, we're now used to the shorter because we've been taught. You know, years ago, we were doing like 5-2, 10-2, whatever that they were doing. And we attended a 3-hour Galloway training and he told us 30-30. We changed our watches. We did the race the next day without ever training. And I was 7 minutes faster than we had done the go a month before. And we were doing 4-2 versus, then we went to 30-30. And so that made me a believer immediately.
Hey, you find what works for you. What the other thing though that I found is that I need to be careful that with run walk, whether it's 2-2 or whatever, or 30-30, is gliding into the walk
I'm gliding out.
and gliding out, because it's the transitions, I think, where people get into trouble.
Allison, I'm glad you brought that up because that is something that is so important and something that I try and remind people of every week. You know, you have to really work at that smooth transition, especially from the run to the walk, or else that's a prime zone for injuries right there. You can't just stop suddenly. You've got to, you know, kind of power down into the walk from the run pace that you're
And
at.
especially the 30-30, I mean, even more. So the 30-30 than a 2-2.
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
you've
I'm
got
not sure what
Definitely.
it is.
Yeah, and that's a big, Galloway is pretty adamant about that, that, you know, you get the majority of that recovery in the first 15 seconds. And then once you get past that 30 minutes, the walk keeps decelerating and slowing down. It's actually harder to re-accelerate and go back up. So these shorter intervals are smoother, more efficient transitions. And so there is a lot to be said for that. There was kind of some numbers got thrown out there. I mentioned my 100K in the fall. The 3 people who finished the race, that's the top 3. I ended up winning. it was a small race,
Congratulations.
but thank you. And I took the lead around mile 33, and then I leapfrogged with the guy who came in second for 5 to 10 miles. And then kind of just kept moving further and further ahead of him. But I ran with him for a bit, or leapfrogged him a bit. I ran with the person who came in third for a number of miles at the beginning of the race. Her strategy was continuous run until she couldn't run anymore, and then she'd go into survival mode. And kind of at the time we were running together, I was like, that's not going to end well. Like, I had been doing my run a mile, walk 30 seconds. And she explained that to me, and we ran like 2 or 3 miles continuously together, and my heart rate actually did elevate during that time. And I finally said, you know what, I'm gonna take a walk break, maybe I'll see you later. And then we leapfrogged for a bit. And then when I passed the guy who ended up coming in second, he told me he was doing 5 minute, 2 minute. And every time I saw him, like toward the end of his 5 minute, he looked dead. And I was like, okay, he's working way too hard on those 5 minutes. And he probably needs more than that 2 minutes to recover. And his 2 minutes is a very slow walk, whereas mine was kind of these fairly brisk transitions. I was running in the high 8s, the low 9s. I have a ton of splits. And then I was walking often 13 minute, 14 minute pace because I wasn't having time to slow down as much. So I do think that there is a lot of merit to those shorter paces, especially in racing. When we go to the training context, though, and we're thinking about all that zone 2 effort, like those longer recovery breaks can be good. And when we look at, everyone in our training team groups is coming from different backgrounds. Some people are more fit, some people are less fit, some people are building up in distance, some people are comfortable with the distance. And so we need different amounts of recovery time. This is a screen grab from a couple weeks of the Start 5K program. And this is all geared around building up to a continuous run. So a different mindset here. That's the goal, is continuous running, but you'll see a variety of different intervals throughout the week. We've got some zone 4 work in the middle with these 30 or 60 second pickups with some 2 minute recovery, because this is running at race pace. And then we want the body to recover from that harder effort. On the weekends, we'll see different options for different intervals that people can use. Again, the goal is to elongate the run. This program's built around building up to continuous running, but we'll see sometimes here we have fairly significant recovery intervals, because option 3 is kind of the people who are starting out with the most opportunity for improvement. So that 4 minute run is going to take a lot of recovery time. Option 1 is the people who are fitter, a little bit more comfortable, but they're still getting a couple minutes of walk there, because that's what they need, because they're taxing their body more and they're going up into heart rate zone 4. Galloway, if someone's using his intervals, they're probably never touching zone 4. They're staying in zone, 3 for most of the race. And that is efficient. That's what we want to do. And the book's a good read. It's very practical. It's very accessible. It's a very easy read. But I think the biggest caveat I would just put on it from my personal standpoint is taking into account the terrain. Like, there's going to be times where you want to say, nope, like, I'm not running this 30 seconds. I'm walking for the next 2 minutes because it's this steep uphill. Or on the converse side, we've got a long gradual downhill. I'm going to ride this. Like, I can run 2 minutes downhill. That's not a problem, because gravity is going to do its work. That's one of the cardinal rules of trail running, is walk all really long distance ultra running, walk all the uphills, run all the downhills. It's an overgeneralization, but for most people in most contexts, that's a good approach.
Well, and John, you may or may not know that Galloway had a major,
Yeah.
that Galloway had a major heart attack last year. And I have gotten COVID damage from heart damage from COVID. And so as I kind of went through that with him, my problem is not the, the 30s, the walk rate. It's, I can't run that long without my heart rate getting too high now. So I've got to even shorten it from 30 a little bit, just so that I don't exceed the heart rate level until my heart recovers. And he's sort of in the same thing, recovering from, he's running 8 seconds, 8 to 10. And he did a 340. A 340 half. He said it was the hardest race of his entire life. As his first recovery race since he had his heart attack. but I really compliment him because he did really short stuff to have to accomplish that. And so we have to do what we have to do. So some of us, we just can't do those longer runs. It's not the 2-minute walk that's the problem. It's a 2-minute run.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And hopefully you recover quickly. Sorry to hear that. But yeah, I think one of the key take home points too that I'm hoping to get through this evening is using heart rate as a guiding principle is really valuable here. And yes, it's an investment to invest into some type of heart rate monitor. But as far as the fatigue avoidance, it's really helpful. Just getting accurate zones, setting those, and knowing kind of, depending on the race distance, I'm not going past this. If you're going on, you're running a 5K, yeah, have at it. Go, work your butt off, drain the tank, be in survival mode for the last half mile, that's fine. But from the 10K longer, let's be tactical about it. Let's take into account our physiology, our fitness level, and keep things in check. And heart rate is often a good guide from that. Sometimes it gets a little wonky when the temperature changes. It's going to be higher in the summer, it's going to be lower in the winter. Stress can have a factor. Stress, not just like life stress, but even running in a group. There's some literature out there that says that people tend to have higher heart rates in races, just the race stress, but also being surrounded by all these other people. There's just a lot more going on. You can't zone out and find your happy place when you're doing your solo run. If you're in a race, and especially the first few miles of the race, when you're trying to navigate through hordes of people, that's going to drive that heart rate up. So there's some adjustments that you have to make to those sorts of things. We do.
Yeah, Michael, this is
go ahead.
Kathy. I was just going to say, I was doing 30-30, and when I started doing longer runs, I actually like that better because I can slow down. When I was doing 30-30, I was trying to do like a 10-11 minute run. If I do longer run, I can do like a 12-30 run and still be about the same time. It's just a matter of you can slow that run down if you go a little bit longer too, but it's kind of personal preference, and you're still averaging the same thing. So I just play leapfrog with my group sometimes.
Yeah.
And different people have different priorities. Some, they want to build up to that longer run. Some, they just want to go out and have fun. Some, they just want to get the medal at the end of the race. They don't care about their time. So your personal goals, your ambitions, that all factors in here too. We did have a question from John about plantar fasciitis. Sounds like he consulted with a medical professional and that advice didn't help much, and was wondering what he should do to get walking again without pain. That's a question. I wanted to honor the question during the panel because it was submitted, but that's something that kind of really merits a conversation. But if you do want to call or go into one of the stores, we can collect more information from you and we can talk about some accessories, because sometimes footwear is going to be part of that answer. Sometimes it might be a support sleeve that helps provide some compression to the plantar fascia so that it's healing up better overnight. Sometimes it's stretching, physical therapy exercises. There's a lot of different things that could go there, but consult with one of our staff and we can hopefully get you outfits so that you can get active again, because I'm sure that's incredibly frustrating to not be able to get out and walk and exercise. Any other questions that people on the call have?
Michael, just one other thing. You did talk about heart rate reserve. If Andy wanted to look on how to get that information as part of his Garmin 645, could you help him to get that done?
Yeah, absolutely. And I used to have a 645. The 645 definitely accommodates that heart rate reserve preference. So yeah, if you've been coming to training team, we can set that up one morning before the run. Just come find me.
Okay.
Or like training teams at U City on the 20th in 2 weeks. I'll be there for before and after the run. We can definitely chat then. Or give me a call at the store and we can talk over the phone. I can get you set
I
up on
think
that.
that Andy can find you at that U City run, and you could then show him about the heart rate reserve, because we definitely won't be there this weekend.
Yep, great. But yeah, if
Great.
your watch or wearable or whatever you're using supports heart rate reserve, that's for almost everyone going to be a more accurate metric than the standard max heart rate metric. And then lactate threshold does generally require a dual diode heart rate sensor. So you can't get that just using the wrist. But if you can get that number, it is going to be a little bit more accurate. But then recognizing that that number is a little bit more fluid and can change with time. So in the Garmin ecosystem, again, I'm trying not to make this an infomercial for Garmin, but they are pretty incredible devices. I'll once or twice a month when I do an interval workout or a harder workout where I'm going to be exerting myself up near or above my lactate threshold, I'll put on the heart rate chest strap. And as long as you do that, I think your workout has to be over 30 minutes long and you have to hit certain numbers, but it'll actually update your lactate threshold. And then when you go to save your workout, it'll say new threshold detected. You want to accept it or reject it. And almost always I accept it. Every so often, maybe something was weird with that run. And I was just like, no, we'll test this again. But keeping that number current does have value too, because that is subject to change based on fitness level a little bit.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to that.
Yeah. I'm not sure what it is, but.
So one of the points that I made at the beginning and that we kind of talked about leading up to this, and this whole panel actually came out of a conversation that was had during pacer orientation when some of our run walk pacers just pointed out, we think there's a lot of confusion. We think a lot of people don't really know what group they should be training with. Let's try to demystify some of this and give some practical advice. So that's been one of the overarching goals this evening. But I hope we did also kind of make the point that this isn't just for the slower back of the pack runners. I think there's a lot of people who are probably training with our 11-minute group, our 12-minute group, that might actually be better served throwing some walk breaks in there. I know even in my 9:45 group, there's oftentimes like when we were running at Grants Trail the other week and we stopped at some of the stoplights and then we start running afterwards, everyone's just fresher after getting stuck at the red light. Like, do that. Even if you're going to race continuously, in training, take it easy. Like the body doesn't know. There's a coach, he's really popular. He has a lot of very successful trail athletes, David Roach. And David Roach's big thing is the body doesn't know miles. It doesn't know minutes. It doesn't know kilometers. The body knows stress. It knows how much time you're spending in the different heart rate zones. It knows how much physiological stress you're under from work and whether you're getting enough sleep or not. And you have to take all of that into account. So how many minutes you're exercising at a different heart rate zone is often going to be a better indicator than like what pace you're running or how many miles you run on a given day. So building your training plan around 30 minutes this day, 45 minutes this day, I'm doing this many minutes in this heart rate zone is just as effective or often more effective than I'm running 4 miles today and I'm doing 3 miles today and I'm doing 2 miles today. If you kind of do want to be serious about your training, every run during the week should have a purpose. You should have a long run each week when we're building up to our half and full marathons, or almost every week. You should have that long run. You should have 1 or 2 days where you're picking up the pace and working harder and getting into zone 4. If you're doing that twice a week, then probably one of those days, do it for really short periods of time. There's a great workout, which is commonly known as doing strides. These are 10 to 20 seconds, not sprinting, but at a fairly brisk effort, like getting the leg tone over pretty quick. And then take a minute, walk, jog, and do that. And this helps build up leg speed. It helps make you faster. It helps just get, the legs moving. There's a lot of physiological benefits to doing those strides. And then another day during the week, go and do some longer, kind of harder intervals, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it might be, and then throw some longer recovery onto those too. Recovery up to 3 minutes is fine. The science frequently indicates that about 90 seconds to 3 minutes is a good amount of recovery for between these hard efforts. And then the rest of the days, have an off day or two in the week, and then do some easy days. Like after those hard workouts, don't put 2 hard things back to back in the week. Put a walk, put an easy day, put a rest day in there. Some people respond well to having a rest day after their long run. Other people, if they do that, they get really stiff. And so doing a short 20 to 30 minute walk, jog, easy day. The next day is actually going to get the blood flowing, promote better muscle recovery. That you just kind of have to learn your body, learn where you're at. Different coaches, different training plans address that differently. But vary that training throughout the week. Ask questions. Your pacers are resources. The staff at the store is a resource. I'm a resource. Just kind of let us know. We want everybody to be successful, to learn from this. It's a continuous process too. No one's going to get their first marathon or their first half marathon perfect. Even the pros who are getting state-of-the-art coaching don't get it right the first time. They learn, they grow, they improve. That's what we all want to do. Most of us want to have fun. We want to enjoy it. We want to see some improvement. So ask questions, get feedback. Any final thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for putting this together.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.